What happens when forgiveness turns into rejection? When a brother who once extended his hand is forced to pull it back, not out of hate, but out of duty. Tonight's story isn't just about family. It's about betrayal, legacy, and a crown that refuses to be shared. Because this time, Prince William didn't just say no to his brother's return. He replaced him entirely. And the man he chose to fill Harry's shoes isn't even royal by blood. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It began quietly. No announcements. No press leaks. Just a whisper inside the palace walls that Prince Harry, the once beloved people's prince, had been reaching out. He wanted back in, not for attention, but to serve, to rebuild what he had lost. Or so he claimed. But behind that gesture was a storm of motives, old grudges, and unhealed wounds. And while the world debated whether the prodigal son should return, Prince William was already preparing a countermove, one that would seal his brother's exile forever. Because sometimes, in the royal world, forgiveness is just another form of strategy. You might ask yourself, why now? Why would Harry even want to return after everything? After the Netflix deals, the memoirs, the interviews that shook Buckingham to its core? Maybe it was nostalgia. Maybe it was guilt. Or maybe, just maybe, he realized that the world outside those palace gates wasn't as golden as it seemed. Life in California had become quieter, emptier. The public sympathy was fading, and the headlines were turning sharp again. So he reached out. But what Harry didn't know was that the monarchy had already moved on. The gap he left behind had been filled, the emotional wounds patched over, and his brother was no longer the man he once knew. Prince William had changed. The boy who used to protect his younger sibling had become a leader with one clear mission: protect the crown, no matter the cost. And that's where the story truly begins. Imagine this. Inside the grand corridors of Windsor Castle, staff rushing with sealed folders and coded messages. A secret file marked "Transition of Duties." It wasn't meant for the public. It wasn't even meant for most of the family. But inside that document lay a decision that would redefine royal protocol. The Duke of Sussex would not be returning to the family's working fold. His requests for reinstatement, quietly denied. His appeals through private channels, ignored. And yet, there was something colder than the rejection itself. Prince William didn't just shut the door, he bolted it. For every royal event Harry once proudly attended, from the veterans' engagements to mental health initiatives, William assigned someone new. A man whose name had never appeared on royal rosters before. Sir Timothy. Now, if you're wondering, who on earth is Sir Timothy? You're not alone. When news of his appointment leaked, even seasoned royal correspondents were stunned. Sir Timothy wasn't royal. He wasn't an aristocrat from an ancient lineage. He wasn't even part of the extended Windsor circle. But to Prince William, he represented something far more important: loyalty without history. And that's exactly what the monarchy needed. Someone untouched by scandal, unburdened by emotion, and willing to serve without question. You can almost imagine the tension of that moment. Harry in California, waiting for a response, checking his phone in silent hope, while miles away in London, William sits at a polished oak desk, signing off on the last piece of paper that makes Harry's return impossible. Two brothers separated by more than an ocean, separated by principle. But before that decision was finalized, there was a storm brewing behind palace doors. King Charles was torn. His heart wanted one thing. His crown demanded another. Advisors warned of backlash. The optics, the global headlines, the sympathy that would pour in for Harry if he was seen as banned. Yet William was unmoved. He saw things differently. To him, it wasn't about punishment. It was about prevention. Every time Harry had re-entered the royal sphere, chaos followed. Interviews, accusations, emotional fallout. William believed the monarchy couldn't survive another PR war. And so, in his view, the best way to protect the family was to ensure that Harry would never again stand beside him on a palace balcony. There was no grand confrontation, no shouting match, just a quiet, calculated move. And perhaps that's what makes this moment so chilling. Because when a royal decision is made in silence, it echoes louder than any speech. Still, deep down, there was something hauntingly tragic about it. For all the pomp and grandeur, this was still a story about two brothers who once shared everything: grief, laughter, even rebellion. You can picture them as young boys, walking behind their mother's coffin, holding each other's hands. And now, one of them was effectively erasing the other's name from the family roster. But William's move wasn't purely emotional. It was surgical. The monarchy, he reasoned, needed stability. The public needed to see progress, not pain. And in his eyes, the best way to rebuild the institution's image was to eliminate the variables, starting with his own brother. To most people, that sounds heartless. But to William, it was leadership. And what about Meghan? Sources say she saw it coming long before Harry did. She reportedly warned him not to chase ghosts, telling friends, "They'll never forgive him." Not really. But Harry, ever the optimist, believed that time heals everything. He underestimated how much time had hardened his brother instead. Some claim William's decision wasn't even personal. It was generational. As the future king, he was already thinking like one. The crown, not the family, had to come first. And perhaps, in that cold equation, Harry simply didn't fit anymore. Still, one can't ignore the emotional undertones. A man doesn't replace his brother with another man, unless he's trying to make a point. Enter Sir Timothy, the symbol of that point. A trusted friend, a man of impeccable record, known for his loyalty and discretion. To the public, he was an unknown. To William, he was the ideal replacement. And when the paperwork was finalized, the message was crystal clear. The Duke of Sussex's era was officially over. But here's the part most people don't know. Harry was blindsided. He didn't learn about it from his father, not even from a private call. He found out through a journalist's inquiry, a headline that read, "Prince William names Sir Timothy as new royal envoy for Commonwealth duties." Imagine that moment. A brother reading in the press that his role, his identity, had been quietly handed to another man. It wasn't just professional humiliation. It was personal exile. And yet, even then, Harry didn't lash out publicly. Not at first. Those close to him say he was stunned into silence. He withdrew, refused to comment, hoping maybe it was just temporary. Maybe William would reconsider. But the calls went unanswered. The silence became permanent. Meanwhile, inside Buckingham Palace, there was quiet celebration. Senior aides reportedly felt a sense of relief. Finally, closure. The family could move forward without the constant fear of another scandal. William's move was seen as decisive, firm, and, to some, long overdue. But not everyone agreed. Behind the scenes, a few voices whispered doubts. Princess Anne, ever the straight-talker, reportedly told a confidant, "You don't replace blood. You correct mistakes." Her words echoed through the palace, but they couldn't undo what was done. And King Charles? Torn between pride and pain. Sources close to the monarch described him as melancholy but resigned. He loved his sons, yes, but he also knew the monarchy could not survive another civil war. Still, even the king didn't anticipate how far William would go. Because when the news broke, it wasn't just an administrative shuffle, it was a declaration. Every photo op with Sir Timothy, every engagement he took on, every smiling wave from a royal car sent a message louder than words. There was no place for Harry in the working monarchy anymore. And the public reaction? Divided. Some praised William's leadership. Others accused him of cruelty. Social media lit up with comparisons. One brother the loyal heir, the other the wandering rebel. Memes, debates, think pieces, everyone had an opinion. But what most didn't realize was that this decision wasn't spontaneous. It had been months in the making, carefully choreographed, sealed behind layers of royal secrecy. It was, in many ways, William's most defining act as future king. And his coldest. Yet, for all the strategy and symbolism, there's still the human question. How did it feel? To reject your own brother not out of hate, but necessity? To close the door on someone you once promised to protect? Perhaps that's the curse of monarchy. Emotion and duty can never live under the same crown. And so, as the cameras captured William and Sir Timothy shaking hands at their first joint event, the world saw two men united in purpose. But behind the lens, another man watched from afar, stripped of title, stripped of trust, and silently realizing that he had been replaced not just in the palace, but in his brother's heart. And that's when the story takes its first dark turn. Because what William did next didn't just end Harry's royal ambitions. It would expose the deepest fracture the monarchy has faced since Diana's death. What came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It started with a phone call no one was supposed to know about. A call made not from Montecito's luxurious living room, but from a quiet corner of a rented private office, one that Prince Harry used when he didn't want Meghan listening in. The voice on the other end? A senior palace aide he once trusted, one of the few who hadn't completely turned their back on him. The message was simple. If I wanted to return, what would it take? Right there, in that whisper, began the secret return plan. It wasn't about status. Not entirely. It was about belonging. About reclaiming the one thing Harry had lost that all the money and deals couldn't replace: purpose. Because while California gave him sunshine, it didn't give him identity. But Harry wasn't foolish. He knew the palace would never just open its gates. So he crafted his approach carefully. A series of quiet feelers, not to the king directly, but to people close to him. Old friends, trusted staff, private secretaries. Each conversation framed delicately, not as a plea, but as a proposal. If I could contribute again, off record, behind the scenes, he'd say. Would that even be possible? Some thought he was joking. Others saw the desperation behind the charm. Because deep down, they all knew this wasn't about forgiveness. It was about survival, and he had reasons to feel desperate. In Montecito, the fairy tale had begun to fade. The deals weren't as lucrative. The spotlight wasn't as kind. The Netflix producers who once fought for his time were now chasing newer faces. Public sympathy was thinning, and every story about the Sussexes now seemed to carry the same undertone: fatigue. Harry felt it. The rejection wasn't just professional, it was personal. For years, he had branded himself as the modern royal. Independent, relatable, free. But what happens when freedom turns to isolation? When every charity you once championed quietly distances itself because they can't risk offending the crown? He started realizing that being royal wasn't a costume you could take off and put on again. It was blood. It was identity. And without it, he felt invisible. So he decided to make amends. To return, if not as a prince reborn, then at least as a man who could serve again. At first, he didn't tell Meghan. He wanted to handle it alone. To prove something. To himself, to his brother, maybe even to the ghost of his mother. He wanted to fix what had been broken. But secrets don't stay buried long in that marriage. Meghan found out, and she wasn't pleased. According to a friend close to the couple, she confronted him in that same rented office, her voice sharp, her tone more disappointed than angry. You think you can just walk back into that family after what they did? After what they said about me? Harry tried to explain. It wasn't about her, it was about him. But Meghan had heard that line before. She warned him that the palace didn't forgive. They'll smile. They'll nod. Then they'll shut the door in your face again. But Harry was stubborn. He believed that his sincerity, his service record, his decades of duty would still count for something. He was wrong. Because across the ocean, in London, the very people he was hoping to reconnect with were already 2 steps ahead, and not in his favor. By the time his message reached palace ears, it wasn't received as a gesture of goodwill. It was seen as a security risk. If he returns, one senior courtier said, it opens old wounds and new headlines. So, the calls were logged, the notes recorded, and the message discreetly passed up the chain. Within days, Prince William was briefed. The heir to the throne didn't shout. He didn't curse. He didn't even look surprised. He simply said, "We expected this." That one line sent chills through the room. Because William wasn't thinking like a brother anymore. He was thinking like a future king. Every move had to be strategic. Every emotion had to be filtered through duty. And when the question was raised, should we consider allowing Harry a gradual return? His answer was instant. No. And then, quieter, we moved forward. While Harry was crafting his redemption arc, William was sealing the exit plan. But here's where it gets interesting. Someone within the palace, possibly out of guilt, continued to feed Harry bits of information. Enough to keep him hopeful, but never enough to change the outcome. He believed the silence meant deliberation. He didn't realize it meant rejection. Weeks passed. He drafted letters. He made calls. Even reached out through a mutual contact, a military organization he once co-founded, hoping they could mediate. Every message carried the same theme. I just want to serve again. Quietly. Humbly. For the people. He even suggested splitting his time between the US and UK. Half in, half out. The same model that had once gotten him exiled in the first place. It was a full circle moment. Except this time, it was far too late. Inside the palace, the decision had already been made. William wasn't just saying no. He was replacing Harry altogether. You see, the monarchy thrives on continuity. If a royal goes missing, someone else must fill the gap. It's how the institution survives. So while Harry thought he was negotiating his return, William was finalizing a new appointment. That's when the name Sir Timothy first appeared in official minutes. On paper, it looked simple: Sir Timothy Reynolds to oversee Commonwealth youth and veteran initiatives under the Prince of Wales's office. But the symbolism was immense. Those were Harry's projects, his pride, his proof that he mattered. And now, they were being handed to another man. Yet Harry had no clue. He still thought his plan was working. He even told a friend, "It's looking good. There's movement." Movement, yes, but not the kind he wanted. Meanwhile, William's team began preparing for the eventual leak. They knew the public would notice. They always do. So, they crafted a narrative. Sir Timothy's appointment reflects modernization and inclusivity. Behind that polished phrasing lay the unspoken truth. Harry's chapter was closed. Back in California, the tension between Harry and Meghan deepened. She couldn't understand why he was chasing ghosts. He couldn't understand why she wasn't supportive. Nights grew quieter, dinners shorter, conversations colder. Friends noticed the change. One insider described it perfectly. Harry looked like a man waiting for a letter that never came. And that letter would never come. Because when William received the final report confirming Harry's request, he gave one final instruction: to keep all correspondence confidential and to proceed with public rollout of Sir Timothy's appointment before the end of the quarter. Translation: make it official before Harry can react. And that's exactly what they did. Within 48 hours, the appointment was announced through the royal press office. Carefully worded, perfectly timed. And it hit the news cycle like a quiet bomb. But that's not even the worst part. Someone leaked the internal memo showing how early the decision had been made, weeks before Harry ever reached out. Meaning, his secret return plan was doomed before it even began. The palace had predicted it, planned around it, and quietly replaced him while he was still hoping for reconciliation. Now, you might think Harry would lash out. But he didn't. Not yet. Because denial is powerful. He believed there was still a misunderstanding, that maybe this was temporary, or maybe they needed time. He even sent a message of congratulations to Sir Timothy, short, polite, heartbreakingly naive. "Wishing you success in your new role," he wrote. The work matters more than the names attached to it. But even as he typed it, he must have known. The names always mattered. Because when you're royal, identity and purpose are the same thing. Take one away, and you take the other. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, William's circle celebrated what they called a clean transition. No drama, no confrontation, just quiet removal. That's the new royal way. Eliminate chaos before it can begin. Still, whispers started spreading in the press corridors. A few sharp-eyed journalists noticed the shift. "Where is Harry's involvement?" they asked. "Why is Sir Timothy representing the crown at events once linked to the Sussexes?" Kensington Palace refused to comment. But the silence spoke volumes. Then, a curious thing happened. One of Harry's former aides, out of loyalty or pity, slipped him a copy of the internal memo. It confirmed everything. The timeline, the decision, the signatures, even William's final note at the bottom. "Proceed with Timothy. Future must be clear." That line broke him. Because for the first time, Harry realized his brother wasn't just managing him. He was erasing him. He reportedly spent hours alone that night, pacing. Meghan found him in the garden, staring at his phone. He didn't say much, just that the decision was final. But deep inside, something hardened. He had tried peace. He had tried apology. And in return, he got silence. So, he decided to stop waiting. If the palace wouldn't let him return quietly, he'd make noise. And that decision, that flicker of defiance, would ignite everything that came next. But that's a story for later. Because before the noise, there was one more quiet betrayal. One that would destroy the last thread of brotherhood between William and Harry. And it started with a conversation overheard in the palace library. One that would leak within days and expose William's real reason for cutting his brother off forever. What came next would change everything. And no one, not even the king, saw it coming. William didn't shout. He didn't pace. He didn't even blink. When the report reached his desk, the one that said Harry has asked to return, He simply placed it face down and exhaled slowly. The air in his private office at Adelaide Cottage was still. Only the faint hum of an old clock filled the silence. He'd been expecting this moment for months. Of course he did, he muttered under his breath, not in anger, but in resignation. For William, this wasn't just another episode in the royal soap opera. It was the inevitable result of a brother who, in his eyes, had burned too many bridges to ever come home again. The aide standing nearby waited for a reaction, a question, an instruction, anything. But William's stillness was the answer. He wasn't going to let emotion cloud judgment. Because he'd learned something that his brother never did. In the royal family, emotion is weakness. He leaned back in his chair, tapping the report with a finger. He doesn't understand, does he? Understand what, sir? The aide asked. That this isn't a family anymore. It's an institution. That sentence carried more weight than he realized. It was the emotional pivot of his reign-in-waiting, a clear sign that William was no longer acting as a brother trying to mend things, but as a monarch in training guarding the fortress. And the fortress, as he saw it, could not afford another breach. For years, he had stood by silently while Harry tore into the palace machinery. The interviews, the documentaries, the memoir, all of it had chipped away at the family's image. William had defended his father, protected the monarchy, and absorbed the criticism. But deep down, he'd never forgotten the sting of betrayal. Now Harry wanted back in. And William's reply was simple, no more. But his version of no was not emotional or public. It was quiet, calculated, surgical. The kind of decision you only make once and never reverse. That same morning, William summoned his closest advisors, Sir Clive, his communications chief, and Lady Alicia, head of internal protocol. The meeting lasted just 15 minutes. No dramatics, no arguments. Prince Harry has requested partial reinstatement, Clive said cautiously. William folded his arms. And we could issue a polite statement, say the family values his continued service abroad, something soft. William shook his head. No statements. No sympathy. Just clarity. Lady Alicia raised an eyebrow. So, you want to deny him outright? Not deny, he replied. Replace. Those two words sent a shiver through the room. Replace. Not ignore. Not delay. Replace. William had already made up his mind. If his brother wanted back in, he would make sure there was no position left for him to fill. To the public, that might sound cruel. To the palace, it was brilliant. Because in royal politics, removal isn't achieved by force, it's achieved by irrelevance. William knew the press would one day ask, could Harry return? And now he would have a ready answer. There's nothing for him to return to. It was elegant, ruthless, final. The aides nodded reluctantly. And who takes his place? William paused. I already have someone in mind. That name, Sir Timothy Reynolds, would become infamous soon. But at that moment, it was just an idea, a strategic substitution. Sir Timothy was everything Harry wasn't, disciplined, discreet, and loyal to the institution, not his own emotions. William admired that. Still, even as he finalized the decision, there was a flicker of hesitation. He walked to the window and looked out toward the sprawling gardens of Windsor. Somewhere out there, he had once played with his brother, two boys chasing footballs and laughter. Two brothers who had promised each other they'd never let the system come between them. Now the system was between them. He took a deep breath. It's not about punishment, he said quietly, as if convincing himself. It's about survival. The aides didn't respond. They didn't have to. Because in that moment, the heir to the throne stopped being a brother and became a strategist. Later that evening, as the rain tapped against the window panes, William sat alone with a glass of scotch. His phone buzzed with messages, press inquiries, updates from staff, a reminder about an upcoming event. He ignored them all. Instead, he opened his private correspondence folder. A digital archive that included years of personal letters between him and Harry. Messages from better times. One caught his eye. It was dated 2012. Harry had written, "No matter what happens, you and me, we're unbreakable." William stared at that line for a long moment, his jaw tightening. Then he closed the file. Because unbreakable bonds don't survive royal politics. And Harry had made his choice years ago. Still, the decision wasn't without consequence. William knew this move would trigger emotional waves across the family. King Charles, ever the sentimental father, would hesitate. He'd want to find a compromise. But William wasn't going to let that happen. He had seen what indecision did to the monarchy. He wasn't going to repeat it. The next day, he drove to Clarence's house for a private meeting with his father. Only a few people were present: Charles, Camilla, and the ever-watchful private secretary, Clive Alderton. Charles listened quietly as William laid out his reasoning. "Father, you know as well as I do. Every time Harry gets involved, chaos follows. This institution cannot take another blow." Charles frowned. "He's still your brother, William. And you're still the king," William replied, his tone measured but firm. "This is about protecting the crown, not indulging guilt." Camilla's eyes flickered. She didn't speak, but the faintest nod confirmed she agreed. Charles leaned back. "And you're sure this replacement, Timothy, is up to it? He's loyal, experienced, controlled. He'll never speak out of turn. That's what we need now." The king sighed. "You sound like me 20 years ago." "I'm supposed to," William replied. "One day, I'll be in your chair." The conversation ended there. No raised voices. No reconciliation plan. Just quiet acceptance that one son had outgrown the other. Outside, the rain stopped. Inside, the final divide was sealed. Word spread quickly through the inner circle. By evening, senior courtiers were briefed. Prince William had formally declined Harry's return proposal and appointed Sir Timothy Reynolds as his successor in all associated duties. It was done. Yet even in victory, William wasn't immune to the sting. That night, he returned to Adelaide Cottage and found Catherine waiting in the study, reading reports. She looked up. "You did it." He nodded. "It's over." She hesitated. "You don't feel conflicted?" He gave a faint smile. "Of course I do. But being conflicted doesn't change what's necessary." Catherine closed her notebook. "I just hope one day he understands." William poured himself another drink. "He won't. And that's fine. Understanding isn't required anymore." Outside, the moonlight stretched across the courtyard, reflecting off the wet cobblestones like shards of broken glass. Meanwhile, miles away in California, Harry was about to discover the full weight of that cold reply. Because while William had kept his composure, he'd also kept meticulous notes. Every detail of Harry's request, every date, every message, documented and archived. The monarchy doesn't argue. It records. And when a journalist inevitably uncovered that paper trail, the narrative would be airtight. Prince Harry's request was considered, but found incompatible with the current structure of royal operations. In other words, the perfect bureaucratic shutdown. But beneath the polished press language was a private cruelty. Because this wasn't just about blocking Harry. It was about making sure he could never try again. The monarchy doesn't issue second denials. William's advisors quietly updated all future planning documents. Where Harry's name once appeared, Sir Timothy's would now take its place. Charities, military patronages, travel itineraries, every trace replaced, one by one. Within a week, the Duke of Sussex portfolio was gone. And for William, that silence was victory. But not everyone inside the palace shared his satisfaction. Princess Anne, ever the straight talker, cornered William during a briefing and asked, "You think this is strength, boy? It's distance. And distance never heals." William's jaw tightened. "Healing isn't the goal, Aunt Anne. Stability is." She gave him a long, disappointed look. "You sound more like your father every day." He didn't flinch. "Good." Still, her words lingered. Late that night, he sat awake staring at the family portrait in his office. Charles, Camilla, himself, Catherine, the children. And an empty space where Harry once stood. For the first time, he wondered if leadership always required loneliness. But he quickly dismissed the thought. Because the next morning, the newspapers were already hailing his decisiveness. The Prince of Wales acts swiftly to stabilize royal image. A modern monarch in the making. The headlines were glowing. Exactly as he intended. It seemed the world admired firmness more than forgiveness. Still, behind those flattering headlines, the next storm was already forming. Because one royal aide, the same who had once handled both brothers' schedules, couldn't stand what she was seeing. Quietly, she copied parts of William's confidential notes. Among them, a phrase scribbled in the margin that read, "Trust can't be rebuilt when one brother keeps burning the bridge and the other keeps holding the match." That note, leaked just days later, would send shockwaves across the media. It was the first public glimpse into William's true mindset, and the world wasn't ready for how cold it sounded. Because if that was how the air felt, what hope was left for reconciliation? And yet, that was just the beginning. Because somewhere in that quiet storm, one man, the one chosen to replace Harry, was preparing to step into the spotlight for the first time. And his very existence would redefine royal loyalty forever. What happened next would stun even William himself. Who was the man who just replaced a prince? Who was the quiet figure that now carries the duties once meant for the son of Diana and Charles? That's the question that swept through London like a sudden chill. Reporters scrambled, insiders whispered, and even palace staff who had worked decades in those halls asked each other the same thing. Who on earth is Sir Timothy Reynolds? Because the name had appeared out of nowhere. No prior royal connections, no noble title by birth, no tabloid history. Just a short line in an official announcement that read, Sir Timothy Reynolds will assume a number of Commonwealth and charitable duties formerly overseen by the Duke of Sussex. To the public, it sounded simple. But to those who understood the monarchy, that one sentence carried the weight of a lifetime. It meant a new player had entered the most exclusive game in the world, and he had replaced blood. So who was he? Sir Timothy Reynolds wasn't born into royalty. He was born into service. A man molded by discipline, not destiny. He came from a modest background, son of a history teacher and a nurse. Grew up in Yorkshire, far from the glitz of London. His early years were marked by quiet ambition. While other boys dreamed of fame, Timothy dreamed of purpose. He joined the British Army at 18, serving in the Royal Marines. Over 2 decades, he earned a reputation for loyalty, precision, and moral restraint, the kind of man who did his duty even when no one was watching. Decorated for bravery, knighted for service, and admired by his men for leading from the front. But what made him truly unique wasn't his medals, it was his silence. Sir Timothy never gave interviews, never wrote a book, never sought attention. He embodied the very thing the modern monarchy had been missing, restraint. That was what drew William to him. They first met during a charity event supporting veterans, back when Harry was still part of the fold. It was Harry who introduced him. Tim's one of the good ones, he'd said proudly. The irony of that moment would later sting like poison. Because years later, that same man would become the symbol of Harry's replacement. William had always remembered Timothy's quiet professionalism. Unlike many who orbited the royal circle, Timothy never flattered. He never leaked. He never speculated. He did what needed to be done and disappeared into the background. In a world drowning in gossip, that kind of discretion was priceless. When William decided to permanently close the chapter on his brother's return, he knew he needed someone who could fill the gap without controversy. Someone who could serve the institution without stirring emotion. That man was Sir Timothy. But for Timothy himself, the offer was both an honor and a burden. He wasn't blind. He knew what accepting this role meant. He'd be seen as the man who replaced a royal. The man who benefited from a family's fracture. The man who stood in a place that once belonged to a son of Diana. When he was summoned to Clarence House for a private audience with the King and the Prince of Wales, he walked in with the calm of a soldier and the awareness of a man stepping onto thin ice. William greeted him with a firm handshake. "You understand what this entails?" "Yes, sir," Timothy said. His voice was steady. "I serve the crown. Not the man. Not the name. The crown." That single sentence sealed it. William nodded. "Then you'll do fine." It was a short meeting, 20 minutes, perhaps less, but its impact would ripple for years. By the next morning, palace insiders were buzzing. Williams found his new Harry. One quipped to another, half in jest. But beneath the humor was unease. Replacing blood with loyalty was a dangerous precedent, even in royal circles. And yet, the decision held. Within days, Sir Timothy's schedule filled with engagements. Public appearances, meetings with charities once championed by Harry, media training sessions, not for him to speak, but to remain unshakable when others did. He wasn't there to shine. He was there to stabilize. And in that role, he was flawless. But his arrival did more than fill a gap. It exposed one. Because suddenly, the world could see what Harry had lost. At his first public appearance, Sir Timothy attended a veterans rehabilitation program, the kind of event Harry had once owned with passion. Cameras clicked, analysts compared. Timothy stood tall, crisp in his suit, greeting former soldiers with warmth but no showmanship. He didn't cry. He didn't hug. He didn't pose. He simply listened. That image spread like wildfire. Commentators praised his quiet dignity. And in Montecito, Harry watched that clip, the same way the world watched him watching it. You could almost imagine his reaction, the forced smile, the clenched jaw. Because for all the world's decorum, that moment was raw humiliation. The man he'd once introduced as a friend had become his replacement. Now, imagine how that felt. Because if exile stings, replacement burns. Yet Harry stayed silent publicly. Maybe he knew reacting would only confirm the narrative, that he was jealous, bitter, irrelevant. But behind the scenes, sources say he was livid. It's a stunt, he reportedly told a friend. He's trying to erase me, and he's using a soldier to do it. But it wasn't a stunt. It was strategy. William had found the perfect counterbalance to his brother. Where Harry was impulsive, Timothy was methodical. Where Harry spoke emotionally, Timothy spoke sparingly. Where Harry sought connection, Timothy sought consistency. And the public noticed. Polls began to shift. Approval ratings for the Prince of Wales climbed. Public trust in the monarchy, once shaky, rose slightly. For the first time in months, headlines were positive. The crown had found its order again. Still, there were whispers. Even some within the palace questioned the morality of it. One aide was overheard saying, "It's like replacing grief with discipline. Effective, yes, but cold. Cold, perhaps, but effective nonetheless." Sir Timothy himself remained immune to the noise. He carried out his duties with military precision. No controversy, no opinions, just quiet service. And yet, behind that calm exterior, he was not unfeeling. According to one close associate, Timothy struggled privately with guilt. He respected both brothers, the friend said. He knew he was walking into a wound that hadn't healed. In an old notebook he kept from his service days, he wrote a single line during that period. "Sometimes loyalty to the crown means betraying a man." That line would later resurface, a haunting reflection of what it meant to serve a monarchy at war with itself. Meanwhile, in California, Meghan was furious. Not just because of the replacement, but because of what it symbolized. They didn't just cut him out, she told an insider. They replaced him with someone they can control. She wasn't entirely wrong. Sir Timothy represented control, the antidote to the chaos the Sussexes had become. Still, William wasn't interested in optics anymore. He was interested in legacy. He'd watched his mother's image nearly destroy the institution. He wasn't going to let emotion or family fracture do it again. And in his mind, Harry had become the living embodiment of both. But as Timothy rose quietly through the ranks, something unexpected began to happen. The public started liking him. They called him the People's Knight. Editorials praised his humility. Veterans spoke glowingly of his empathy. Young people saw him as proof that ordinary service could elevate you to extraordinary heights. The irony was brutal. The very traits that once made Harry beloved, sincerity, connection, relatability, were now being projected onto the man who replaced him. It was poetic, cruel, perfectly timed. But Timothy never exploited it. He never sought credit. When asked about comparisons to Harry during a rare interview, he simply said, "No one can replace a prince. I just serve where I'm asked." And yet, that humility only made him more popular. Behind palace walls, William was pleased. His experiment had worked. The institution had survived without its most rebellious son. In fact, it was thriving. But beneath that success lay a quiet irony neither brother could escape. Harry had introduced Timothy into their world, and now, Timothy had become the bridge William used to close the gap forever. Still, there were rumors. Some claimed Timothy had been handpicked not just for loyalty, but for leverage. Others whispered about private documents he'd signed, confidentiality agreements, non-disclosure vows that even senior royals hadn't seen before. Whatever the truth, one thing was clear. The monarchy had found its perfect soldier. But even perfection comes with a price. Because while Sir Timothy was winning public trust, his very presence was deepening the royal rift. His success made Harry's absence impossible to ignore. Every positive headline about Timothy was a subtle reminder of what Harry used to be and what he had thrown away. And that's where the cracks began to show again. Because Harry couldn't stay silent forever. He started calling old friends in the press, dropping hints, planting doubts. suggesting that Timothy wasn't as squeaky clean as the palace made him out to be. It was a dangerous game, one that could backfire spectacularly. But Harry didn't care. He wanted to remind the world that he still existed, that he still mattered. What he didn't know was that William had already anticipated that move and had a response ready that would leave Harry completely cornered. Because sometimes, the coldest reply isn't made with words. It's made with action, and the next one would shock the entire world. There are rooms in Buckingham Palace the public will never see. No tours, no photographs, no official records. Just layers of red velvet, ancient portraits, and secrets older than the monarchy itself. It was in one of those rooms, the Lancaster Room, deep within the palace, that the royal family gathered for what aides would later call the longest night in recent royal history. The topic? Prince Harry. Again. But this time, it wasn't about what he'd said or done. It was about what he wanted to come back. Only this time, the discussion wasn't between brothers. It was a summit of the crown's most powerful figures. King Charles, Queen Camilla, Prince William, and a handful of senior courtiers. No press, no leaks, no pretenses. Just truth, tension, and a decision that would ripple across generations. The meeting began at dusk. Outside, London was drenched in rain, the palace lights casting soft glows across the wet courtyard. Inside, the air was heavier than the storm. King Charles entered first, holding a folder stamped with the royal insignia. His expression was unreadable, but his posture told the story, weary, guarded, uncertain. He had faced rebellion before, but this was family. Camilla followed, graceful but calculating, clutching her reading glasses like a sword. William entered last, composed, focused, but with that quiet intensity that meant the decision was already made. A courtier poured tea, and the doors were sealed. No one would enter or leave until an agreement was reached. Charles broke the silence. "You've all seen the reports," he began softly. "Harry wishes to resume some form of public service. Perhaps it's time we discuss what that means." William didn't even look up. "It means nothing." He made his choice. Camilla's eyes darted between them, studying. "William, your brother." "He's not my colleague," William interrupted. "He's not my subordinate. And he's certainly not a working royal. He's a private citizen who's made millions criticizing this family. Why would we let him back into the fold?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Charles sighed, rubbing his temple. "He's still my son. Then he can be your son privately," William replied, calm but cutting. "But he can't be part of this institution anymore." Camilla leaned forward. "What if he genuinely wants to make amends?" "There's value in forgiveness, William." "Forgiveness, yes," he said coldly. "But not reinstatement." Charles exhaled. "You're speaking like a king already." "I'm speaking like someone who doesn't want to watch this family burn again," William shot back. The tension was electric. The sound of rain tapping against the windows filled the silence. Charles closed the folder slowly. "Do you have an alternative, then?" "I already do," William said. "Sir Timothy." Camilla raised an eyebrow. "You've chosen him officially?" "Yes," William replied. "He'll handle all Commonwealth and veteran engagements. He's dependable, disciplined, and apolitical. Everything Harry isn't." Camilla gave a knowing smile. "That's quite the endorsement." But Charles wasn't convinced. "And what happens when the public notices? You think they won't see what we've done? They'll compare. They'll accuse us of replacing one son with a stranger." William's voice lowered, steady, controlled. "They can't accuse us of replacing him if he's the one who left." That line silenced the room. For a long moment, no one spoke. The sound of the old palace clock chimed 9. Charles finally stood, walking to the window. "Do you remember, William, when you were boys? You two promised me you'd never let the crown come between you." William looked down. "That was before I understood what the crown demanded." Camilla's tone softened. "Your brother's return might humanize us, at least in the public's eyes. A family reunited." "Reunited?" William scoffed. "You can't reunite with someone who's made a career out of betrayal." Charles turned sharply. "He's still family." William met his father's gaze, unflinching. "And I'm still the future." The words hit like gunfire. Camilla leaned back, observing quietly as the king's face hardened. "You're saying," Charles said slowly, "that you would rather see the monarchy lose a son than risk losing control?" William didn't hesitate. "Yes." Charles exhaled through his nose, the sound of disappointment masked as understanding. So be it, he murmured. But not everyone in that room agreed. From the far end of the table, an older courtier, Lord Stamford, keeper of the Privy Seal, finally spoke. He had served 3 monarchs and survived countless scandals. Your Majesty, he said carefully, we must tread lightly. History doesn't look kindly on monarchs who exile their own blood. William's jaw clenched. We're not exiling him. We're preventing another disaster. The old man's eyes were sharp. Disaster, Your Royal Highness, or discomfort? That question pierced the room like lightning. For the first time, William's composure faltered. But only for a second. He leaned forward, his tone lower, colder. The difference doesn't matter. The result does. Camilla broke the tension with a quiet chuckle. Oh, William, you really have become your father. William didn't smile. Good. Then maybe this time, the monarchy will survive its sons. The conversation shifted. They debated logistics, statements, scheduling, security clearances. But the emotional decision had already been made. Harry's name would be formally removed from the list of active royals. Sir Timothy's would replace it. Charles listened, his face unreadable. At one point, he muttered, "It's strange, isn't it? The crown always asks for sacrifice, but it never sacrifices itself." No one responded. When the meeting finally ended, it was past midnight. Rain had turned to mist outside, the palace gardens glistening under the moonlight. Camilla lingered by the doorway, turning to William. "You did what had to be done," she said. William nodded curtly. So did Judas. Camilla smirked faintly. "Let's just hope this betrayal pays off better." William didn't reply. As he walked through the silent corridors toward his car, the echo of his footsteps mixed with old memories. Laughter, childhood whispers, his mother's voice calling from another room. He could almost hear her saying, "Look after your brother, William." But those words belonged to another life. Outside, the cold air hit his face. He took a deep breath and got into the car. The driver didn't speak. He didn't have to. The weight of the decision spoke for itself. Meanwhile, inside the palace, King Charles sat alone in the empty chamber. The folder still lay open on the table. For a moment, the monarch didn't look like a king at all, just a father wondering when his crown had started costing him his children. Camilla re-entered quietly. "You're thinking about him again." Charles didn't look up. "I keep asking myself, where did we go wrong?" "You didn't," she said. "He did." Charles sighed. "Did he? Or did we simply make him what he became?" Camilla placed a hand on his shoulder. "You can't save them both." And with that, she left. Charles stared at the flickering candle on the table. "Perhaps not," he whispered to himself. "But I can lose them both." He closed the folder, sealing it with a wax stamp. A quiet gesture that carried the weight of finality. That night, royal messengers carried new directives across departments. Security teams updated clearance lists. Press officers revised engagement schedules. The Duke of Sussex's name, once written in elegant black ink, was struck through. In its place, Sir Timothy Reynolds. By dawn, the monarchy had rewritten its own bloodline and bureaucracy. And by breakfast, the press office was already preparing the official release. The machine moved fast. Too fast. Because while the family believed they were controlling the narrative, they had overlooked one thing. The palace walls have ears. A junior staffer who had overheard fragments of the conversation slipped a note to an old contact at The Guardian. The leak was short, but explosive. Royal summit ends in agreement. Prince Harry permanently excluded from working duties. Within hours, it hit the news cycle. Headlines flared. Social media ignited. Commentators debated. Was this the end of the brothers' bond, or the beginning of a monarchy redefined? The palace, of course, refused to comment. But the world didn't need confirmation. The silence said everything. And in California, when Harry saw the headline flash across his phone, he didn't say a word. He just stared, long, hollow, and unblinking. Because deep down he knew. This time, the door wasn't just closed. It was locked. But while the monarchy celebrated its newfound order, it had no idea that another storm was brewing. One that would make even this decision look small. Because far away, Meghan Markle had seen that same headline. And her reaction would shake the palace more than any interview or book ever could. What came next would be personal, explosive, and impossible to contain. It started with a scream. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, but the raw, guttural kind that comes when the last illusion of control slips away. In Montecito, Inside the sprawling mansion the world once called the Sussex Sanctuary, Meghan Markle's patience finally snapped. On her phone screen glowed the headline that had already swept through every major outlet in the world. Prince William ends all negotiations, assigns Harry's duties to Sir Timothy Reynolds. She stared at it for a moment, disbelieving, as though if she blinked hard enough, the words might change. But they didn't. They stayed right there, sharp as glass, reflecting everything she feared was coming, the end of their royal relevance. Harry had been sitting at the kitchen island, silent, scrolling through his own feed. His shoulders were slumped, his expression blank. He didn't even look up. "Harry," she said, voice trembling. "They replaced you." He didn't answer, just exhaled softly. "I know." "You know?" she snapped, slamming her phone on the counter. "You knew they were doing this, and you didn't tell me?" He finally looked at her, tired eyes meeting fury. "I didn't want to make it worse." Her laugh was hollow, bitter. "Make it worse? They've erased you, Harry. You're gone. Your name, your legacy, they've handed it to a stranger. A knight, a man they can control." She began pacing the room, her bare feet slapping against the marble floor. "You tried to go back. After everything we went through, after everything you said about freedom, you begged them to take you back. And now they've humiliated you in front of the world." Harry didn't respond. Because what could he say? That she was right? That every word stung because it was true? That he had, indeed, reached out behind her back, hoping for redemption, and been denied like a stranger at the gates? The silence between them grew heavy, poisonous. Meghan stopped pacing and turned toward him. "You didn't even talk to me before you did it. Do you have any idea how this looks? You're supposed to be free. But instead, you went crawling back to them. And now we look pathetic." Her tone cracked with anger and something else, fear. Fear that their empire, built on independence, was slipping away. Harry stood slowly, trying to steady his voice. "I didn't crawl. I was trying to do what's right." "What's right?" She snapped. "For who, Harry? For you? For your father? For them? Because it sure as hell wasn't for us." He rubbed his face, exasperated. "You don't get it, Meg. It's not about money or titles. It's about purpose. I've spent years trying to find it again. And you think they'll give it to you?" She shot back. "The same people who turned you into a global villain? They're not going to save you, Harry. They're going to bury you." For a moment, neither of them moved. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. Then Meghan's tone shifted. "Softer now. You think I don't understand wanting to belong? You think I haven't tried? But the only way to survive is to stop needing them." Harry looked at her, quiet. "You stopped needing them." "I never did." That sentence hit like a knife. Meghan froze, blinking in disbelief. "What did you just say?" He didn't repeat it, but he didn't take it back either. It was the truth neither of them had said aloud until that moment, the truth that divided them. Meghan had built her identity on leaving the monarchy behind. Harry had built his life on the hope he could one day return. Two dreams moving in opposite directions. She turned away, her voice shaking now. "You've ruined everything we worked for. The brand, the deals, the credibility. How are we supposed to look strong now? The public will eat this up." Poor Harry, begging for a job from his brother. That's the headline they'll run with. Harry clenched his jaw. "Maybe I don't care about the brand anymore." Her head snapped back toward him. "Of course you care. We need the brand. That's all we have left." That line hung in the air, sharp, sad, revealing. "That's all we have left." She didn't mean to say it that way. But once it was out, she couldn't take it back. Harry looked at her, wounded. "That's all we have left? What about the kids? The causes?" "Each other." Her expression softened, but only for a heartbeat. "You know what I meant." He shook his head. "I know exactly what you meant." And then, just as suddenly, the anger drained out of her. She sank into a chair, head in her hands. "They're never going to stop, are they? They'll always find a way to pull you back in, just to break you again." Harry sat across from her. "They can't break me anymore. But I can't pretend it doesn't hurt." She looked up at him, eyes wet. "Then stop giving them the power to." It was one of those moments where love and resentment blur into the same emotion. When two people want to protect each other, but keep wounding each other instead. But Meghan wasn't just angry at Harry. She was angry at the entire machine that had humiliated them again. And she wasn't going to stay silent this time. By the next morning, she was on the phone with her team, PR strategists, publicists, media consultants. "We're not letting this narrative stick," she said firmly. We control the story, not them. Her plan was immediate and calculated. She would subtly counterattack, not directly at William or the palace, but through insinuation. Through interviews, podcast references, carefully placed quotes. She knew the media game better than anyone. We remind people what we've done for the world, she told her team. We don't talk about rejection. We talk about resilience. We talk about why Harry left, the truth. The press still loves a redemption arc. We'll give them one. But even as she plotted, something in her voice betrayed desperation. Because deep down, Meghan knew what this really meant. The royals had moved on without them. The world was slowly doing the same. And the man who had once been her fiercest ally, Prince Harry, was now caught between his past and her future. That night, she sat alone on the patio, wine glass in hand, staring at the California sky. For all its beauty, it felt empty. The paparazzi used to hover beyond the gates. Now, even they had grown tired. The phone buzzed less. The offers were fewer. The spotlight that had once followed her every move was dimming. And it all came down to one decision made in a palace half a world away, by the brother-in-law she once believed she could outmaneuver. But Meghan Markle wasn't built to fade quietly. Within 48 hours, rumors began swirling that she had contacted a well-known journalist from an American network, one with a reputation for handling sensitive royal stories. The goal? To reframe the narrative. An insider later described it as Operation Reclaim. The mission: turn public sympathy back toward Harry and Meghan, portray the palace as cold, and subtly paint William as a man consumed by power. But like all royal wars, this one wouldn't stay clean for long. Because even before the first line of that anonymous insider piece was drafted, a leak from within Meghan's camp reached London. Kensington Palace knew exactly what she was planning, and William was not going to let her win another round. He didn't just want to silence the noise. He wanted to end it. For good. Back in Montecito, Meghan didn't know yet that her new plan had already been compromised. She was still venting to a friend on the phone that evening, her voice raw with emotion. They don't understand who they're dealing with, she said. They think they can erase us. We'll remind the world why they're terrified of our truth. Her friend's reply was quiet. Be careful, Meghan. They've already shown how far they'll go. She paused, a chill creeping into her voice. So will I. And with that, the war between California and Kensington was reignited, one side armed with emotion, the other with power. But this time, the palace wasn't just defending its image. It was preparing to strike back, not through speeches or scandals, but through one calculated leak that would turn the tide completely. Because deep in London, Prince William was readying the next move. One that would expose Meghan's counterattack before it even began. And when it dropped, it would devastate everything she thought she was protecting. What came next would not just test Harry's loyalty, it would destroy what little remained of it. The morning after Meghan's quiet storm, London woke up to sunshine and scandal. Across the newspapers, glossy headlines masked the tension underneath. Sir Timothy officially steps into his role. The monarchy looks forward, not back. And the coldest of all, Prince William's era of renewal. To the casual reader, it was business as usual. But behind those pristine press statements and photo ops, a full-scale information war had begun. Because while Meghan's team was trying to rebuild her and Harry's public image from Montecito, William's machine was already one step ahead, shaping the global narrative before she could even finish her talking points. It was a game of perception, and William knew exactly how to play it. The first move came in the form of an exclusive leak to the Times of London. Palace sources confirm Sir Timothy's appointment represents a new model of royal service, modern, transparent, and merit-based. That phrase, merit-based, was deliberate. It wasn't just praise for Sir Timothy. It was a dagger aimed at Harry. Because in the court of public opinion, it suggested something unspoken. Harry hadn't earned his place. He had inherited it. And now, his replacement had done it the proper way. The press loved it. Suddenly, talk shows buzzed with debate. Is this the end of nepotism in the monarchy? Has Prince William modernized the crown? Analysts on both sides of the Atlantic applauded the refreshing accountability. Even those who once criticized the monarchy for being archaic found themselves praising the move. And as for Harry, his silence only fueled the story. Because when you don't respond, people fill in the blanks for you. Meanwhile, Meghan's carefully orchestrated response was faltering. Her team had pitched an upcoming podcast episode that would address resilience in the face of betrayal, a not-so-subtle allusion to recent events. They'd also lined up sympathetic commentators to push back on the replacement narrative, suggesting that William's move was vindictive, not visionary. But something unexpected happened. Every outlet they reached out to, The Guardian, Vanity Fair, even American morning shows,